Hi Cherries, it's Jessica here from Cherry on Top, and today's video is part of a two-part video where I will be showing how to use molds. I personally love using molds. I use them all the time in my projects. I love that you can keep using the same item over and over and over. But I hear all of the time that people have a hard time using them or they don't know what to fill them with. So in this video, this is the part one. I will be showing what to add to them to use them. And then in the part two, I will be taking the molds that I make and using them in a project. So stay tuned for the part two and let's get started. So here are some of my molds. I like using the Prima ones, which are made of silicone, and then the Stamperia ones, which are made of clear PVC. And both are a little bit flexible, so it helps with popping out your molded piece. All of the techniques that I'm showing today can be used interchangeably on either types of these molds. I'm starting here using Prima modeling material, and they made this specifically to be used with their molds, so it works really great. It's nice and light, and it can be easily put in, and I feel like it's fairly foolproof. I push it in all the way, and then I'm using a palette knife just to make sure that the outside edge is nice and flat, because I generally will end up gluing this to a piece of paper or a notebook or something else flat. You can also pull these out and round them if you would like them to be a little more shapely, so that's also an option. I pop them out of the mold while they are still wet, and I like to do this one because it gives it a more even drying all over, where if I left them in, the part that is in the mold dries a lot slower than the part that is outside. And then also, if I mess up anything, I can just re-squish the clay and try it again. That technique can also be done with other types of clay or paper clay or clay that you bake in the oven. So there's a lot of options with that. This next technique that I'm using is I'm using a hot glue gun. And this is one of my favorite techniques because it's so quick, it is so easy. I don't have to have a lot of planning time. So like the modeling material takes a couple hours to dry, and some of the other options that I'm going to be showing, it just takes a little time. Where the hot glue, it literally just needs to cool down, and then I can take it out of the mold and just go for using it. What's also cool is that hot glue guns, you can buy different colored glue. So I'm using the black because I thought it would work with these Halloween shapes that I'm working with. But you can buy hot glue sticks in a lot of different colors. So that gives you some options there. The downside with using the hot glue is it is harder to get into the really small or more detailed areas in your designs. Usually I'm not too picky about it and I'm fine with it, but something to help you is just make sure that your glue gun is at the hottest temperature. This will give you more time to really let the glue soak into those crevices. Next, I'm using a two-part resin. This is probably what I see the most with molds. It makes a really clear image of the mold, and you can have them clear or you can make them colored, and there's a lot of options with them. The only downside is that you have to wait 24 hours before you can use it, but when I use this technique, I will usually just batch make a lot of my molds and wait the 24 hours, and then I can just use them all when I'm ready to use them. So I'm using the ColorPour resin, and what you want to do is you make a 50-50 mix. So to do that, I'm using little Dixie cups. I like that they're small and I can still see through the side, but I pour part one in a Dixie cup and then pour the exact same amount in Dixie cup number two, and then you dump them both into 1 cup and mix it really, really well. The way that this resin cures is by the part 1 mixing in with part 2. So you really want that perfect mixture, that 50-50 ratio, and it to be really well mixed. If you saw while I was mixing, I was also making sure that I was scraping the sides and really mixing it well. I probably mixed it for a minute or 2. So once you pour it into the mold, you'll usually see a lot of little bubbles. I'm using the silicone poker and then a heat tool to bring the bubbles to the top. And you have, I'd say maybe like 10 minutes or so. The box says 30, but I usually feel like I don't get 30 minutes of time to mess around with it. But I try to keep it more in 10 minutes and then not touch it anymore. But so you do have a little bit of time to poke all the bubbles out, add your colors, and then you just leave it and don't touch it until the next day. I am mixing in dyes that were made to be mixed in with resin. You could also use glitter or sequins or like dried flowers. All of these are options that you can mix in with your resin to create a bunch of different looks. When I grab all of my resin stuff out, I like to mix up some extra so that I can also fill some of my other molds. And this way I have molds to use for future projects as well. I feel like if I'm mixing all of it and going through all of the grabbing out the resin, I might as well make a few batches and use up a bit. I also find that when using these molds, you need a lot less than what you think, so I always end up making too much. But that's why having extra molds around is very helpful. Next technique is using UV resin. So this is similar to the resin I was just using, only that instead of curing with a part 1 and a part 2, it cures with UV light. So I like using this when I'm more in a pinch or if I have an idea for a project that I want to get done today, because it is so quick and easy. This only has 1 part and you put it directly into your mold, and when you're doing this, it's not going to start curing until it hits that UV light. So you want to make sure you're not doing this by a window or anywhere where you can get a little bit of sun in, because it will start to cure it. And again, I'm using the heat tool to go around and pop the bubbles. I find that this is less effective with the UV resin than the regular resin. The regular resin pops really well when I bring out the heat, but for the UV resin, I find using the little silicone tool to pop all of the bubbles works a lot better. And then here I'm using the light and going over both sides of the resin, and I probably held the light around it for maybe 3 minutes or so. This mold was really thin and I applied it really thin, so I didn't need very much time. If you made something thicker, it might need a little bit longer, so maybe more like 6 minutes or so, but yeah, so I was able to do this in about 3 minutes, and now it is ready to go. With any of the molds, if I overfill or I have a little bit of spillage around the edge, I just grab a craft knife and cut it off. And it's usually pretty easy to cut off. So the UV resin and the hot glue are definitely the quickest options. But here is, I waited till the next day, so this is a day later, and a look at the 2-part mixed resin. So you can see all of the little details that get picked up when you use the resin. I also did this cat, so you can see the difference between the resin cat and the hot glue gun cat. And here's some more. Like I said, I used quite a bit of the resin. I mixed up a bit of extra, so I would have some extra. Here's the look at the clay. The clay actually does pick up a lot of the details really beautifully as well. I hope this gives you some inspiration to get started using molds, whether you're using the modeling material or you could even use like a clay that you bake in the oven or other air dry clay, or the hot glue, which is really good for a quick and easy project. The 2 different resins, whether you want to wait a day with the 2-part mixed resin or if you want it done today with the UV resin. So you have some options to play with, and let me know in the comments which option you use the most or you think you will use the most. And stay tuned for the part 2 where I will be using these molds that I made today in a project. Thanks for watching.